Recently, I was blessed enough to be working at one of my quilting retreats, and we were focused that day on my Gears quilt. Now, one of my favorite students, Nancy, you know who you are, came up and said, what if we did it in blues and greens and made it a garden theme? Well, Nancy, here you go. We're going to break today's project into two different steps, basically. Let's talk about the background first, and then I'm going to walk you through how I made a bunch of these fun applique shapes just using all the templates you already have laying around your studio, right? So first of all, thank you. We've got a couple of different fantastic fabrics out there. So from Northcott, I'm using a green pack and a blue pack together, right? And then from Robert Kaufman, I've got a solids pack that we're going to use as our applique pieces. And what I want to do is I'm going to use 2 of each of the blue and 2 of each of the green. But in the quilt behind me, you can probably see some of the squares have some real high contrast and some of the squares have some real low contrast in their color, right? So in order to do that, we're going to pair a green with a blue and a green with a blue from each set. But this first set we're going to call our low contrast, which means we're going to pull right from the top and right from the top. We're going to join these right sides together. We're going to go to our sewing machine and sew around all 4 sides. I'll show you more in a second, right? But for our low contrast pile, or excuse me, our high contrast pile, the ones that are really jumping around on the quilt back there, you're going to take one of your stacks and just flip it over, just like that. And then that way when you're pulling your pieces out, you're going to pull from the bottom here where the light ones are, and take from the top here where your dark ones are, and join them. So just 1 blue and 1 green all the way around, go through all your pieces. And when you're set with that, you'll have a giant stack of them that look just like this. And you can see here, I've stitched with a 1/4 inch all the way around. Real easy. Now, one of the tricks I want you to do first, I'm working on a Lazy Susan mat, so it's easy to control my square, is I want to go ahead and just gently dog ear these cuts. Now, don't cut all the way through the cross of the threads. We're going to need that here in a second. But let's just take these off now so that we don't have to deal with them later. This is just some bulk management because we're going to be building pinwheel blocks today. Then you take a nice straight edge, lay it right over the cross of the threads. Doesn't matter where the corners are, right? Even if they're in the wastebasket. Now, without moving the fabric at all, we're going to rotate this and we're going to do it again. Okay, but this time from the other corners. And every 2 little 5-inch squares you have should now yield 4 new half square triangles. And you'll go to your ironing board and you'll go ahead and just press these over to the dark side. So when they're all done, you're going to be able to take 2 units, join a blue and a green together, right? Blue and green together to start building the beginning half of our block. To finish the block, you'll need another set of those, right? Now we've got options. That is not what we're going for. This right here is known as a broken dishes block. We're not going for that either. Today, but you could. Today we're going to go for the pinwheel, and you know you've got it correct when you fold these over to go back to your sewing machine, and you got a nice big lump right in the middle of all of your fabric there. Your machine will go right over it though. Just nest those seams or pinch it so that the threads touch each other there, and then just sew that with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. And when it's all done, it'll look just like that. So what I need you to do is go through and build all of your stacks, both the low contrast and the high contrast, and then join me over here at the quilt because I want to kind of walk you through how I handled all of my colors, right? So starting down at the bottom, and I might not even need to move my stool there. In the bottom area, I'm using primarily the lower contrast, the darkest blocks possible down in here. And then I kind of drifted them around to the side a little bit. I wanted the sunlight to be coming through my garden this way, so most of my lighter and or my higher contrast blocks are also up in the top area. So I do recommend you spread out all of your blocks at one point and go ahead and manage them, mix them all around until you have them just the way you like them. And then from that point on, we're just going to take them off square by square. And in order to join those, when you put them together, you'll notice you also get the broken dishes look. So these will be pinched like this and like this. Go right into the sewing machine, 1/4 inch seam allowance, and you will have that quilt top completed in no time, I promise. Now, applique, super fun, right? This is where you get to go wandering around in your tool shed, or in the description below where we've got a bunch of this stuff available for you. We've got a bunch of fun templates. Of course, you know I'm a big fan of the burst block template. This one I used to create the big sunflower around here. I used 18. You probably need that many. You could probably even get away with a few more. And when you're dealing with those, basically, the easiest way to get them is I just stacked up a few fabrics at once. Lay your burst block template on the bias from edge to edge. And basically, normally, if we're piecing with this, we can leave these little pinked edges up there, but when we're not piecing with it, I'm gonna do a little left-handy right now. Did I get it? Oh, almost. When we're not piecing with it, we need to get these edges off. So then I just back my ruler back a little bit, slice, slice. Those are clean, and I have a couple layers going here. Slice and slice. Okay, so now I was able to make several wedges quickly. And those wedges, as you can see in the project, right, they're just gonna lay in here and start to move their way around the quilt very nicely. It works very easy that way. Like I said, you'll need at least 18 to make that size sunflower. And then in the middle, you probably saw I used a fun little 3.5-inch hexagon template, and that fits right in here. Super simple, but some of the fun also came in some of the machine quilting. I'm hoping you can see that because it gave it a little bit more detail by doing some of the circles and some of the lines in here. So the entire focus of the applique started for me in the big sunflower. It was large, it was bright, it helped control a lot of the design content throughout the rest of the project, right? So once I had that position kind of dialed in, and you know I just do these on the fly as I go, I took my scraps. And not only did I take my scraps from those, but look at this. I made a huge stack of those burst wedges and all of these other triangles. So then what I can do is I can just start taking 2 or 3 of these at a time if I'd like. And I can lay them underneath something like my medium-sized orange peel. Now the orange peel, you can actually fit one of those and 1 or 2 of the small, so don't just plop that right down in the middle there. I want you to go ahead and move it over to the edge. Okay, and I'm gonna be smart. Let's use our Lazy Susan, that's why we have these things, right? And then for this, it's the same thing. I'm gonna slide it down, make sure I've got plenty of room to get other pieces, and I'm gonna cut around here. But what I am not gonna do is I'm not gonna square out that end. I'm gonna come up here past this way so that I'm starting to create a bit of a sharper tip, like you can see down here also, right? Because petals don't often have square ends to them. So then I can make some fun petal shapes like this that work very nicely as well. And with those shapes and some of the ones made from the smaller shapes, we can start doing all kinds of other fun stuff, right? So down here on the quilt, first of all, let's talk about finishing out the sunflower. Following it down, I put in some larger leaves, and those were done by taking one of the medium-sized orange peels. I think I just have the bright yellow orange peels right now, but you get the idea. You can just set those in there. You can add a little bit of character by setting them offset if you like. So that's how I did the leaves down the stem. We'll do the stems at the very end. Then the other fun little mini sunflower down here, it's not the burst block templates at all. It's actually that medium-sized orange peel. So you'll take those and you can just start to layer them around. You can see I've got a couple of not so pretty cuts, so I could maybe bring this one around here and I could hide it with the next one, right? And looking down at that small flower, you also see that I put another one of the hexagons in the center of that. But to make it fun and different, I wanted to make it smaller, but I only had a 3.5 inch. So what I did then is I just randomly cut off what looked to be about a 1/4 inch of each of the 6 sides. I think I might have done 7. Perfect. Now it's a much smaller one and will fit right down in there for you as well. So that's how I made a little bit smaller hexagon just by whittling it down. One of my favorite happy accidents happened right here. I was actually cutting them and I didn't realize I didn't cut all the way through the fold. Now this one here is actually planted. I did it on one of the small ones. I hope you can see that down here, but it works great on the big ones too. So these fun ones like this, you can keep it on the fold, and then you could take maybe like a brighter one and you could drop it in here, and then maybe a couple of even darker ones in the back side here to kind of get that look of like a tulip. So for me, the beauty in quilt making comes from experimenting, comes from designing and just playing. I get so incredibly excited when I take some real basic shapes and things, start putting them together, and I get this really fun and clever output when it comes to shapes like these flowers. So I'm going to encourage you just to look around and be creative and clever with what you do. I promised you some stems, right? So let's talk real quickly about how we can do the stems. You can use them from your scraps, or I did leave my darkest of my brown solid fabrics available so that I could come down here, and to get the most out of my 10-inch square, I started down at the bottom and I just did a real gradual S-cut like that. And then at the base of the stem, it's going to be wider, and it's going to come in and gradually become more narrow as it works its way to the top. So here is a stem that you could come in and drop into any of your flowers. The big stem for the sunflower, I actually had to make 2 or 3 of them. So then what I would do is I go, uh-oh, well, I'm getting out of control here. So then I just matched this up and kept on cutting to extend out what becomes a bigger stem. Let me see if I can do that. I didn't cut all the way through because I came off my mat. But I just did that, and then of course you just need to come in here, and one of my tricks when I'm splicing applique on applique, no straight lines, so I just did a random kind of wiggly cut like that, so that when I machine quilt over it, it just goes with the flow of the machine quilting. Time to discuss that as well. Check this out. Now, I've already talked about the sunflower, and because it's fused, sometimes it can be a little tricky on the quilting machine itself, so I didn't want to do a ton of work, but what I did want to do is I wanted to add detail and texture to make it look like a sunflower here. I added these lines to hold down the applique shapes, and I also stitched on the lines of the applique shapes themselves to hold them down permanently. I added a little more character in some of the stems, and over here, I added a little more character in some of the smaller flowers just to bring your eye to them as well. And then in the background, I just basically did a motif that kind of looked like wind swirls, just nice and open, used a green variegated thread, and you can hardly see it. It does still need to be quilted densely. One of the things that could happen to you brand new machine quilters, so this is a caution, don't be scared, but a caution. If you quilt all this from the center as you've been taught, thumbs up. But then if you jump down here before you quilt this space between here, you could get a bit of a pucker inside. So I quilted all my appliques first because I'm comfortable with that. But while I was doing that, I spread my hands wide. So I had my hand wide here and this hand wide here to decrease the extra amounts of wadding and batting and puckering that could happen in here, and it ended up quilting down very nicely. So if you've never quilted an applique quilt first, I'm going to still recommend you move from the center outward to prevent any potential problems. But if this is not your first rodeo, jump in, thread that machine, and let's get her done, and I will see you next time right here at Man Sewing.